Surfing's changing, guys. Get used to it.
And that was the voice of Gwen Spurlock there in the Garden Studio about an hour ago. And Rob and I have not stopped arguing since. What's our beef with each other, Rob?
It's, I wouldn't say it's a beef, Tom.
No, I suppose it's a really kind of 24-hour steamed pulled pork that's really tasty, actually, isn't it? But yeah, nice and soft.
I mean, it's more of a disagreement on the direction that we think, or we hope that surfing will take in the future. And I'd like to take this opportunity actually to double down on my anti-jockification of surfing stance that I kind of adopted during that show. And I've got a theory to go with it that will become more clear after listeners have heard the show. And it goes a bit like this. So Gwen is clearly someone that's really goal-oriented, and she has kind of her elite athletic cap on her head throughout most of that interview. And whereas I was kind of saying that I think that surfing should stick to its kind of counterculture, anti-establishment roots, and that's how I see surfing and how I'd like it to remain. And I think there's a good reason why. So I have kind of been around surfing for a long time before I started competing, having grown up going to the beach with Dad when he went surfing and hearing all his old stories and goodness knows what else. Whereas Gwen's journey into surfing was slightly different. And I believe, as you'll hear again in the show, that Gwen got into competing in surfing very shortly after learning to surf through her association with the Mumbles lifeguard. So it's always been a very contest
about competing.
Competition-centric
interesting
pursuit for her, whereas I've kind of been more around the traveling, storytelling, lifestyle.
You're saying that surf
aspects.
Culture is a thing that perhaps you can sort of inherit before you've actually stood up on a wave.
Yeah,
interesting.
I guess so. But
so I break your theory totally, though, don't I? Because like I'm jock till I die. I just love competing.
No, you're not. Again, it's as we discussed. It's very hard to define. It's more of a vibe. But no, you're not a jock as much as you'd like to think you are.
Okay. Oh well, I was taking Gwen's side on things very much, wasn't I? And yeah, what she's the person I think to give the big word to on this. Then, so
it was a good one. I enjoyed our chat.
Brilliant, and it's going to rumble on into future guests now, isn't it? Let's hear Gwen's take on it all. It's Gwen Spurlock in the Garden Studio, guys. In episode 9 of Crest,
we're joined in the Garden Studio by one of Wales's most dominant competitive surfers and now manager of the British surf team.
Gower Ripper Gwen Spurlock is here to chat about the ups and downs, wins, injuries and milestones of her fascinating career, as well as her bright view of the future for surfing in this land.
Thanks for tuning in to this, our first full feature-length episode in the Garden Studio. You've heard the short Tom did with Richard Stroud, but it's a pleasure now to recommence the Legends series by welcoming Gwen Spurlock to the show. How's things, Gwen? Find the place all right? Because it's a pretty secretive location.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was fine. Just down the road, and I had very good directions from you, Tom. So thank you very much.
Burn after reading, they are.
We'll throw down a few words by way of introduction shortly, but first, a reminder of the other wheel on this axle. To my left, a man who, upon hearing of the impending lockdown, immediately enrolled in an online hedge laying course. Titled Hedging Your Bets, Preparing for the Apocalypse, the course promised its pupils to teach them everything there is to know hedgewise. From the double stake style to the Montgomery, the Brecon to the Westmoreland, he's now a certified member of Hedge Layers of Britain. It's Tom Anderson. How are you, Tom?
I'm all right. I'm a bit under pressure here now, aren't I? I've just gone for something nice and honest this week, actually. And to my right, need I say more on this special day? It is the most honest surfer in Wales. The man who waited later than anyone else, potentially the whole of Northern Europe, actually, to break his lockdown surf cherry. It's a wet-haired, tanned and smiling Robert Webster Blythe. How are you feeling?
Pretty good, thanks, Tom. Nice to As you say, I've had my first surf post-lockdown. It feels good. So Gwen, for your benefit, Tom and I, I'm not really sure when it started or where it started, but we've given each other intros each week, and they've kind of got bigger and bigger and more elaborate, and we have to ask you now to pick a winner.
I mean, I had no idea where both of those were going, but I have to say Rob was far more impressive. Sorry, Tom.
He's into a 2-0
I want a
lead now.
3-1, I think, isn't it?
No, 2-0.
I think it's because he confused me more than anything, whereas yours was a bit more simple. I thought that was a bit more elaborate.
Harry said the same thing. Harry said I don't understand half the words you boys
So
are saying.
I'm just going to give you,
But then Luke
give
was
you
the
my
other way,
vote.
wasn't he? Because he said that I was too confusing.
I think you tried too hard.
Yeah, I can't try hard. I don't want to be a
Simple
tryhard.
is fine, mind.
Yeah.
It is fine.
Yeah, that's true. Well, as standard, we got a normal one for you, Gwen. So,
boring.
a big welcome to Crest. You heard in our intro that Gwen is a formidable figure in a contest jersey. How formidable exactly is evidenced in a glut of Welsh Open titles, a British Junior Crown, European Pro Tour wins and a BUCS Championship. The CV speaks for itself there. But it is the energy she has consistently put back into Welsh and indeed British surfing which makes her a standout among the ranks of the country's most decorated riders.
Her role as the current British team manager means she takes the helm during what is, for all nations, one of the most exciting times to be involved in the development of surfing. Pandemics notwithstanding, Olympic involvement now means significant interest, both commercial and governmental, is being taken in the journey of a modern up-and-coming surf star. As federations restructure and rejig their operations to meet these challenges, we're stoked that the front line of British elite surfing is now back at the beck and call of a Welsh person. And let's start there. Tell us about the role and where it's taken you so far in terms of actions and responsibilities.
Well, that was a full-on introduction.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to learn that? That is amazing.
Oh, give it a bit of welly, don't we?
I know.
Yeah.
Fair play. You guys have got some time on your hands. Wow. So first of all, I'll go with the role. So for 2020, I am the British Surf Team Manager. For 2019, I applied for a role of being one of the joint head coaches for our first Olympic qualification event, which was in Miyazaki in Japan, the September just gone. Yeah, so I saw that the role was being advertised. All I understood was surfing was going to be in the Olympics, and perhaps Britain had a chance at some sort of qualification, and that was our first part of that. So yeah, so the role is pretty much for this year. I was supposed to manage the team to go away to our second Olympic qualifier, but COVID-19 put a stop to that, and at the moment we are waiting to see when they are going to announce the next date, which they did originally say would be to the latter end of 2020, which at the moment, with the amount of cases that are going on in Brazil and Central America, we're not so sure that's going to happen. So
it's El Salvador,
That's the route I was going to try and lead us on now. Clearly you don't know a great deal above that, but have you got any guesses, perhaps informed guesses, as to what's going to happen in that as part of that Olympic qualification?
Well, my understanding is half of the qualification slots are gone due to the 2019 selection from the WSL and the 2019 ISA World Games, which I just said was the first non-professional pathway. So in terms of the next route, my wild guess would be they might hold it again at the same date they were meant to this year, which would be May 2021.
Gosh, that'd be a short turnaround then for anyone who makes it, wouldn't it? Yeah.
But it was that for this year.
Yeah.
I think they have
they
have a minimal amount of time that they have to be able to pull together. I think the latest, don't hold me to this, but maybe 6 or 8 weeks that's the last time you can qualify for an Olympic event and the turnaround. So I think we were cutting that fine anyway. So they do still have a considerable amount of time to run the next Olympic qualifier, but it's just who knows what's ahead.
We have, I say we, Britain has a fairly big interest in it, don't we, in terms of Jay Quinn?
Right, yeah. So in terms of, I mean, from a Welsh perspective, Jay has been incredible in terms of his ability, his results and what he's managed to do for Welsh surfing within the last few years. I mean, he's brought us 2 European titles, which is huge for the sport here in Wales. And not just that, I think he was a great influence on the juniors coming through and them being able to see him and seeing what he's achieved. And it's sort of creating that pathway for them. In terms of what he's looking to do in the future, I personally haven't spoken to Jay and I have no idea what his plans are. From a British perspective, it would be great to have him involved in the next the next group, if he were to be selected via the Welsh and be selected via the British. Obviously, there's that pathway of selection which has to be adhered to. But yeah, from my understanding, he's now moved back to New Zealand.
Yeah.
So
I heard that. It's difficult because I suppose he'd kind of had a certain date in mind, and then to have it all pushed on by a year.
Right.
So we'll have to wait and see what happens, I suppose, won't we?
Absolutely. But aside from Jay, we also have lots of talent within the UK.
Of course, yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned there about the different qualification paths, and we briefly mentioned the newly formed British Surfing Federation.
Right.
And I mean, I don't know anything about it. What's the thought behind making a new British Surfing Federation?
I mean, I suppose it's quite new in terms of its formation, which was 2016, and it was formed by the founding members of the home nations, which is the Welsh Surfing Federation, the Channel Islands Surfing Federation, Scottish Surfing, as well as the English Surfing Federation. So they all came together to form this specifically to select, manage and coach British teams in the hope of Olympic qualification. So that's the purpose of British surfing.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple remit, and good luck with that.
Thank you.
It's going to happen at some point, hopefully.
Well, fingers crossed. I mean, I think surfing's changing, and the culture of it is completely changing, along with us being now really considered as a legitimate sport. So I think this is part of that movement. I mean, I know it divides people who obviously love to surf for just the fun of it and the fact it's an individual sport. But then you also now have that side where it is a sport.
Yeah.
And it's being taken seriously, and now there's a pathway for people to earn a living from it and to chase their dreams.
I suppose the big turning point as well in the recent history for surfing is that it does seem now to have cracked getting people who don't surf to enjoy spectating or watching it on a webcast or on TV. So it's got, it's actually managed to be presentable whether or not you actually ride waves. Whereas I suppose, go back 10 years, 15 years, it's probably you had to surf to want to watch a contest, really, didn't you?
I think, interestingly, if you look at slopestyle being introduced in 2014, I think, into the Sochi Games,
that's
you have
a good analogy.
For sure. If you look at the criteria that they use and the variety of manoeuvres and the slope and what they have to join and collect with in terms of points, you look at that and you go, well, actually, surfing is a comparable to that. Obviously, we have an ever-changing landscape in terms of the water, but there is a way to judge it, and I guess we're all going to do our best, and we're all trying to conform to the ISA judging criteria. And that's what we've been working towards in Wales for a very long time. And I know in every event you go to across the world, whether it's WSL, whether it's a European Surfing Championships, whether it's ISA, you tend to get different head judges. So what you're looking at does tend to change depending on what head judge you have, but realistically, we are getting better at understanding what is needed to be done to create those excellent scores. And here in Wales, I think we're just trying to simplify it, and in the UK, of how we go about creating that.
Yeah, and we've got guys bouncing through heats on the QS now in some of those kind of mid-level comps, and Luke Dillon and Peony Knight. And,
Absolutely. I guess you can't. There's a few people. I guess you can't really leave out of that conversation. I know Peony Knight is doing extremely well. Ellie Turner is doing extremely well. Excuse me. Luke Dillon obviously is our male representative that we have there. That's doing some significant damage, or has done some significant damage. But we also have other surfers now who potentially might be vying for British selection, which might happen in the future, might not. We've had the likes of Jake Elkington, who has been through the ranks in South Africa but holds a British passport and has surfed for England in the past. So he's a force to be reckoned with also. So it's really important to make sure when we look at our landscape of the surfers to go, well, okay, I have these people surf for anyone in the UK, and are they looking to, because they should be included within that conversation as well.
Well, let's go back to people that inspired you in the early days then, because you started off surfing through a friendship that you had with Beth Mason at Mumbles Lifeguards, and then from there it was Tracy Boxall, right, at Llangennith, who sort of really got you guys moving and competitive.
That's totally correct. So Beth and I have known each other since birth. Our parents were best friends throughout uni, and when we moved back from America, we bought a house 3 doors down. So our lives and our surfing, if you want to call it a career, are highly intertwined. So I moved back from America in 1999, and I started Mumbles Lifeguards.
So that's what, age 9?
9 to 10, yeah. I think it was important to be introduced to the sea, because I lived inland in South Carolina, so I didn't really get an opportunity to spend a lot of time in the water there.
So at that point, you're a deep south gal when you moved to Wales.
Absolutely, yeah. deep south. Yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, no. So yeah, I started surfing with Beth. I think Errol, Beth's mum, who's also quite a large figure in Welsh surfing for a few years. I think she bought us for Beth's birthday surf lessons from GSD. Yeah. And that was pretty much the start of it.
So that was Simon J.M., was
That's
it?
correct,
GSD?
yeah.
Oh, great.
And then that transpired and transformed into what would become squad training, and then Tracy Boxall moved across from Australia and started working in Swansea, I think with Simon at first, and then she ended up doing her own stuff as well, and we ended up doing squad training with her then. So she was a really pivotal part of my competitive surf career and training, and what I would consider she's definitely a key role.
Right, and Beth is a friend, like a family friend, not like a school friend, because you were saying that you didn't go to the same school as Beth, because you'd basically grown up speaking deep southern drawl.
Pretty much. I like that. You tried your best.
I tried. Went into it then.
I think you got.
I tried a golf voice last week. It was embarrassing.
I think you got your kicks then. I'm going to give you that one. So Beth went to the local Welsh school, as did her brothers. My sisters also went to the local Welsh school as they're older. So pretty much when we came back, I missed the cut-off by 2 years, so I couldn't go to a Welsh school, so I went to the other local primary school, which I would have loved to have spoken Welsh, but unfortunately my mum and dad didn't move back in time, move us back in time. So no, we definitely didn't go to the same school, and we weren't even in the same year group in school, so she was a year above, but most of the year she's 2 years above me.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. So we're just super lucky that we had surfing as that bonding factor, as well as our friendship within families as well, and the fact that we lived literally 2 doors away from each other.
And then you both kind of like didn't look back at all from there then.
Not really.
You know, we pushed each other. And then in the 2004 Welsh, I'm not sure whether... I did actually try checking some of the records with Mark Vaughan today, because they always bang on about the idea of somebody winning the juniors and the open in the same year. And, you know, we know about Barfield and Patrick Landon Dark and Matt Stephen and all this.
Yeah.
But you won the under-14s and the Open in the same year at the Welsh, is that right?
I think so. Hey, you're going to have to...
No, you won the under-14 boys?
Yeah, and girls,
So look at that. Then, so the girls are in with the under-14 boys,
well, yeah.
Yeah, so you won the under-14s, beating all the boys, and you won the Welsh Open ladies at the same time.
I mean, when you're that young, I think it's great just to enter all events, and you just want to be in the water as much as possible, so... I remember my mum just handing me hot chocolates incessantly, being like, keep going, keep enjoying, here's a Mars bar, don't pass out.
It's quite unique to British surfing, I think, isn't it? Like the
mentality.
Well, you just enter everything. It costs about £300 to enter every category.
Yeah.
And you get plied with hot chocolates to keep you warm throughout your life.
No, I love it. It's definitely a fond memory, and something that I guess kick-started maybe a really fun 10 years. Even though that wasn't really the start, but it was where my wins started coming in then, pretty much. With
those wins, Gwen, from my memory, it seemed like you and Beth, although you mentioned Beth was slightly older, you kind of went toe-to-toe. You were sparring back and forth, and it seemed that one year you'd win something, and then the next year Beth would win it, or vice versa, and you took it in turns almost. Did you see that as a rivalry? Obviously you were so close.
Did I see it as a rivalry? No. I think myself, Beth, Errol and my mum used to travel down to Cornwall. I think one summer we counted it was like 6 or 7 weekends in a row, and that happened for maybe 6 years. Because when you're in the junior category, so I would enter maybe 2 or 3 events, and she would only be able to enter 2 because when I was under 16, she wouldn't be under 16, so she'd be entering under 18s and women's, and sometimes I would enter maybe 2 or 3. So there was multiple times memories of us just like, she won the women's, I got second, I won the under 18 girls, she got second, because your final goes in at 320 of the under 18 girls, and then the final of the women's goes in at 340. So all you're doing is like, cool, can I stay in this vest? You're like, yeah, sweet, back in. And now there's something really, really cool about that, driving home and being like, oh, like you picked me in that one. But it wasn't ever a case of me being irritated or upset with her. It was always me admiring. If she had won, she'd won because she rips. If anybody's seen Beth surf, the people would understand that.
Yeah, so you certainly pushed each other then.
For sure.
I think that could count as a rivalry. Was there anyone else apart from Beth that perhaps you felt you had a stronger rivalry?
Any of those under 14 boys, or were they too far back in the mirrors?
I think I took Adam Reimnitz, in that one. I think that may have scarred him a bit.
You moved to Australia.
Yeah. No, rivalries. Yeah, I don't know. I think Beth was the only one I ever properly looked up to in terms of if I'm going to have a benchmark, she was my benchmark. And there was obviously lots of other brilliant surfers across the UK, like Nicole Morgan from Ireland, Shauna Ward from Ireland, some great surfers in England as well. I'm trying to make sure I don't miss anyone out here, but there's lots of brilliant people.
Gosh, Nicole Morgan, I've never met someone so mellow, but then so kind of like aggressive once you put her in a jersey,
Absolutely.
Do you keep a tally against Beth? You got a tally? Do you know what your record is against each other?
No, we don't have a tally, but there's just been moments. I remember she won the Bucks Open event in her first year of uni, which I was travelling in her first year of uni, and then I entered. She graduated, and then I think I ended up going to uni, and then she was like, "Oh, like make sure you win," or was that the juniors, the British juniors when she wasn't in it? She was like, "Oh, like make sure, like don't come home unless you've won it." And I'm like, "Yeah, for sure."
Because you're trying to keep like
no, just it's just the case of it's kind of that fun friendship. Yeah. And also that sense of, we've got like this kind of unique club.
Because I've got a few tallies in my records for you, right?
Have you?
Let's see if you can guess who this is. I know a surfer that you are 1-0 against. And they're sat here now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I speak,
what year
of
was
course.
it?
How do you feel about that, Rob?
That's fine. It's absolutely fine.
So, if we're talking about the 2011 Welsh in Lantwit, and
what a great event.
You got to the quarterfinals of the men's, and
what a great event,
Rob was one of those casualties.
No, it wasn't like that at all.
Fallen by the wayside.
I totally entered that. I think that's one thing that I'm chuffed that there was a group of us girls used to enter the Open. I think myself, Beth and Joe, we used to enter the Open more so for time in the water, because sometimes if you're only surfing one event, you don't get a huge amount of time to practice in that competitive environment. So that's why I always say try and have as much heat time as possible to get used to that environment, but more so at Lantwit because of how much the wave changes between tides. So for me, the main purpose of entering the other event was to figure out how to surf the wave. And it just turns out the waves were quite fun, and I guess the no pressure concept and just being out there and only another 3 other people, it was fun. Yeah.
Scalped.
And you won the ladies.
I think it was close, Rob. I think you were fine.
And you won the ladies that same year. I know because I was stood on my part of the bridge, came second to you that year.
Oh, I love it.
In that heat, seeing you guys all fighting that great waves in that final. Great waves. Just probably some of the best waves you've had in a Welsh, that wasn't it?
I think so. I think we've also had. I think there's been a few times at Fresh where we've had pumping surf.
Yeah. Was
that 2012? Or we had the year after? I can't remember, but I for sure know we've had like 3 to 4 foot glass at the Welsh a few times.
Around then. I'm pretty sure it started in 2009. 2010 was really good.
Yeah, it was 2010.
2010 was really good. 2011
was Lantwit.
Yeah.
12
was
another
another year after it as well. That it was just warm, it's sunny, it's brilliant.
Yeah. Middle
One
Bay.
day soon again, hopefully.
I mean, at least we get waves though at the Welsh.
Yeah.
Sometimes. I mean, not for a few years.
I think last year was a bit small, but in general, I think we've always had waves at some point throughout the Welsh, which I think is really good.
Yeah.
Obviously, of course, I think it's going to be awful to hold a surf contest with no waves, wouldn't it? Okay. That has happened.
We've done a few clubbies around here that would fit that.
I love that.
We've mentioned rivalries. How about inspirational people that you've come across during your
lots of inspiring
your time on the scene?
Lots of inspiring people.
Again, I know you won't want to miss anybody out, but let's have the top of the charts.
Top of the charts, okay. So I guess in terms of inspiration, I guess I have to put Beth up there because in terms of that impact it had on me, that's got to go up that list quite high. In terms of the wow factor, I competed against Carissa Moore in the 2005 ISA World Games when she was competing.
Beach.
Can't remember if she was Team USA or Team Hawaii because at that point they were still separate. And I remember, I think she was on the front cover of Surfer. I remember walking into a shop in Huntington being like, that's what I've got tomorrow. And being a bit sort of overwhelmed, but in a great way. So I think that Carissa Moore, I always looked up to her in terms of physically what she can do on a wave. She's very impressive. I think she's also beaten a lot of guys in QS events or has entered QS events as well. Tried herself out against that. So I really love the way she surfs. And I remember I used to just follow her blog. It's very like fangirl. But when I was a youngster. I think that was definitely a great thing to do. And then in 2006, we met Bethany Hamilton as she was competing for Team Hawaii in Brazil for the next ISA World Games, and that was a few years after she had her injury in her arm taken off by the shark in Hawaii. So seriously, watching her paddle faster than half the guys who are international surfers in solid Mara CS big surf, you just think, like, how can she even do that? And Mara CS is where Gabriel Medina, I think, has his academy. So just to like link that up. And who was in that? I think Julian Wilson, Geordie Smith, Jeremy Flores. There was a key group of great surfers in that event, and she was one of them. And seeing her being able to perform how she did and hold herself as she did just after all of that is completely inspiring.
Yeah, I think she is the definition of the word, isn't she?
For sure, I would say so.
And of course, Bethany Hamilton is most famous for her injury. She should be most famous for her surfing.
Well, I think it's perhaps how she's recovered from the injury and continued to operate at the highest levels, isn't it?
Yeah, because she actually rejected an award when she found out that it was an award for disabled athletes, and she said, because I don't see myself as a disabled athlete, I just want to be judged as an athlete, full stop.
Right.
But of course, that recovery process and that kind of dealing with adversity is the thing that people look to most in Bethany Hamilton. And that's actually something that is quite big in your own career, isn't it? The role that injury and recovery from very serious injury has played in shaping your mindset, because you came across a quite rare injury when you were still a junior, didn't you? That could have set you back really badly. Tell us what happened. Yeah,
so in 2008, I was asked kindly to try out a local wave machine for the opening for the Queen, alongside Beth Mason, Lloyd Cole and Chris Guts-Griffiths. So I think they selected the best people, I don't know, the best people in the Gower crew, the Gower crew for sure. And unfortunately after that, trying that out, I just suffered like reoccurring crazy headaches.
Because what happened? Did you bang your head on the...
No, I didn't bang my head, just repetitively fell consistently for quite a long time when we tried it out, which... So
this is a concussion of some kind?
Yeah, so originally they thought it was post-concussion syndrome, and then for the time that it was going on, they weren't really sure. And then because it was going on for such amount of time longer, they recommended I go for a CT scan, and then that's when the travesty and just like all of that unfolded really and got a lot more complicated. So pretty much I had 2 subdural brain hemorrhages.
Oh.
Yeah, which for people who don't really understand that, if you were to go through the windscreen of your car, that's pretty much what they compare my injury to from an external trauma to understand. But mine were identical. So after everything that happened, my brain surgeon, we had a conversation, and he would say it's something similar to what shaking baby syndrome would look like, because I had 2 identical bleeds directly opposite each other. Yeah, so that unfolded as it happened, and so I originally was meant to have keyhole surgery, which was just 2 holes drilled into your skull to release external pressure, because it was on the external part of the brain, not internally. And then that was successful, but in the CT scan they also found that I had an arachnoid cyst lodged, I think it was in my back left lobe. They are very, very common, and you might never know about them until you were to maybe have an accident and have to have a CT scan. So unfortunately for me, they were concerned that the blood would have activated that, which it had, but we didn't know that until a few weeks after. So just some unpleasantries. I just had brain fluid pumping out of my stitches, and I was in isolation.
All this stuff, were you afraid?
Yeah, so there was a few times where I actually personally asked the surgeon to stop talking, and he just shut me off. Like, obviously, I just pretty much said to him, please, can you stop telling me this, because I understand that in my head I had no option but to go ahead with surgery, even though not for the first one, but for the second one I had an option. But I didn't want to hear about the repercussions. I understood that there was a highly likely chance that I would end up with epilepsy, and the success rate was 75 to 25, and so he had to explain all of the intricate detail, and signing all of those papers and stuff. Yeah, it was heavy for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then since, we've seen Owen Wright wear gaff helmets,
right.
since his, he lost nearly a year through head injury.
Yeah.
You surfed in a gaff quite a bit after that as well then. Was that a kind of a security thing, or was it to protect what had happened?
Honestly, I think at first it was a bit of both. I remember my last meeting I had with Dr. Kate White, which was August of 2008, when I was then given the thumbs up to surf, because I had the 3 months post them drilling into my skull. So they were 3 months and the bone should heal. So then after that point, we think if you're going to start doing things, perhaps then is fine to do so. And I just told him I was going to surf, and he said, well, we advise you not to. And I said, yeah, okay. And he said, I understand you are going to. Yeah. But I said, look, I'll wear a helmet. So it was kind of my compromise with him,
right.
Through the journey that him and I had both very uncomfortably just taken with one another for the last 4 months. I guess it was kind of a moment of respect for the fact that, that man just saved my life.
And
so
you mentioned Dr. White, but it's a couple of the doctors that you've worked with during that process you're now still in touch with, and this has led to the HOW initiative, HOW.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty crazy actually. So over a year ago now, so in April 2019, one of my friends got in contact with me. Her name's Polly Crook. So she's in one of my extended circles. So we've met and we've we've been to the same workout class as an example, but we're not good pals. Her and one of her best friends, Jo Watkins, who is the other co-founder of HOW, had started HOW, and they were looking to start up the surf section of HOW, and they were thinking, how are we going to do this locally? How should we look at running it? And then Polly was like, well, we've got to get Gwen involved. And then Jo was like, Gwen Spurlock. And Polly was like, yeah. And Jo was like, you know her. And then all of a sudden I ended up coming around for a cup of tea to have a conversation about what my inclusion would look like and how I could help. And Joey was like, Gwen, my husband was the anaesthetist on that day where you almost died, and you had a pretty heavy effect on him in a positive way. And we almost called our youngest Gwen after you, but they didn't.
Wow.
So it doesn't count.
Not quite.
But they didn't, so it doesn't count. But Meggie is very, very cute, and no, it's quite lovely now. I actually surfed with him this morning, so yeah, I see them quite a lot.
And HOW stands for
happiness, opportunity, and well-being. And the initiative is to encourage and empower young girls, specifically at the moment across Wales, but they're going to open a global online network forum where they offer opportunities through workshops and working with experts in their field. So they're just trying to give girls an opportunity that they may not have had before.
Wow, it sounds fantastic. What a noble cause as well.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So moving back to surfing, post-injury. Okay, so it was the British Juniors in 2008. So you got injured at the beginning of that year and had a very small amount of time back in the water, I assume, before your first competition.
Yeah, so when I was in hospital, I tried to give myself goals to work towards, to trying to keep me happy and motivated, and trying to figure out so I don't feel like I'm super depressed, sat at home and can't do anything. So yeah, that event was always part of what I envisioned myself entering, and seeing just how I did, because my whole mindset was I entered it the year before and I won. So if I don't enter it this year, I can't win. But if I enter it, I still have a chance at winning, and it's still kind of pushing the ideology like you're in it to win it. So yeah, I entered it after being in the water, I think may have been 6 or 7 weeks. And I got to the quarterfinals, but my body was just completely physically drained. So yeah, I came out of that event just very, very tired, just super emotional. I think my mum was trying to pick me up a lot. I think obviously it was quite an emotional time for her to watch me do that to myself, because I put a lot of pressure on myself to try and do well, whilst everyone else around me probably has a different perspective to it, of going, we've just almost watched you die, and now you still think this is the most important thing ever, which is important to you, but at the same time they just wanted the best for me. So yeah, no, definitely wasn't a negative experience, quite the opposite. Quite empowering for me, quite uplifting, and probably the one event that I'm most proud of.
Wow. Yeah, well, it's
that resilience, isn't it? Stoicism in the face of adversity. I
suppose you knew how tough you were at that point.
Yeah, I think you come out of moments when you're sat in a hospital bed and they're like, oh yeah, the rate of survival or the rate of you getting this illness, or, you know, we're not sure, oh, by the way, you almost didn't wake up, and all these things that you then get told after, because you're not there. I was unconscious. I was out cold, so everyone else experienced it around you. So mentally, I didn't really experience that until other people tell you afterwards, after you've experienced the actual trauma. But you feel the physical trauma of having drugs injected into you and going in and out of anaesthetic time and time again. Your body does take an absolute beating, for good or for bad. And yeah, so just pretty much just super, super tired for that first part after that event. And I just said to myself, cool, I got to the quarterfinals this year.
There's a benchmark there.
Yeah, like I made that goal.
Yeah.
I achieved that. I was really happy with myself for doing that, regardless of the result. I think I proved something to myself. I think I also proved something to other people, which was also a driving force to me.
So in 2009, though, was it part of the plan to win everything? Because that's pretty much what you did when you got back into the jersey then. You won the British Juniors, you won the Welsh, you won the UK Pro Tour and the Bucks contest.
Bucks contest was year after, but you pretty much nailed that on the head.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I'm going to give you that. Well done.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the main thing for me was to win the British Junior event as I was leaving the category. And the rest of them are just all part of that, because I think the British Junior event finished in the September, October, and the Welsh was at the start of the season.
Yeah.
So the Welsh always seems to be a bit of a warm-up for the season.
Right, yeah.
And then the UK Pro Tour is throughout the season, so the aim of the game is just to be as consistent as possible and get yourself on the podium as much as possible, excuse me.
I'm here again now, and it's the third guest who's won the Bucks now, isn't it?
Yeah.
And Rob...
Mounting.
Have you won it, Rob?
Second.
Oh,
and I'm third, so I'm like bottom of the tree
God.
here yet again.
Guys,
yeah,
you can't go into the winners' club.
Yeah, I won the drinking contest.
you had a great time.
Yeah.
Who took?
So,
go on.
So in fact, I remember everyone else going out and partying, and I was just like, I remember I went to Gemma Harris's house, slept on the sofa, and stayed away from all of that.
And then won.
So I.
Yeah.
Always tried to make sure that I isolate. I always tried to isolate myself away from that. Even though, don't get me wrong, I enjoy a good time, and I was at uni enjoying a good time, but I try to always separate it.
That's sport, isn't it?
Because I feel like I'm not there to party. I'll go party when I get back to uni on Monday. But that was my relationship with surfing at that time, and with uni, like for things, I don't blend them, like try and separate them.
The year I got knocked out in the second round by the man on the crocodile was...
wow.
I actually stayed in that night. So
that's
the correlation works in reverse.
Yeah. Whereas you'd been out the night before coming.
My most success. I don't think I'd slept.
Right.
There's a positive correlation between.
No, I think there's a bit of sports psychology going on there, Rob. I feel like we could have a conversation about that.
I think I was taking it seriously the year that I came third in it. Yeah, I had all my eyes on Al Meany. Remember, Al Meany.
Yeah.
And it was like
he lives in Portrush.
Yeah,
doesn't he?
if you can keep Al Meany out, you'll be all right. And then this little known fella called Nick Reed was just sort of
I saw him this morning.
His insiders.
Of course he was.
And then afterwards,
he's a machine.
Come out of the water, and somebody said, "Guy over there," and he was ripping. He's won it, and I was like, "What? Him?" I didn't even know who he was at that point. But there we go.
Well, give Nick some credit. Nick does rip.
Oh, Nick.
You surf very well, Tom. I'm giving you both some credit. You both absolutely rip. But Nick Reed also does surf very well. He's a great contest machine as well.
I'm going to say, actually, right, that Nick Reed winning the seniors...
Nick Reed. Sorry, was I saying Nick Reese?
Nick Reed.
Nick Reed.
Nick Reese. I'm sure Nick Reese says okay.
Nick Reese is a wave maker.
Yeah, Nick Reese is a wave maker.
There we are. But there's also another Nick Reese. So there's like two Nick Reeses from Swansea.
Oh, is there?
Getting them all
confused.
There's more than that. Right, the ones that I know, yeah.
Nick Reed, in fact, we're coming on to this now, this contest. We're back here again in the 2011 Welsh.
Get your stats out.
Gotta say, it was just before watching you guys' final in the ladies. I think Nick Reed taking down the seniors that year, 2011 Welsh, is the best I've ever seen anyone surf in the Welsh when he took that down.
Really?
So hopefully, tell Nick to listen to this podcast. And
I will.
That was big, like overhead, solid land to it lefts, and I've never seen anyone surf a final of the Welsh as well as Nick surfed that final.
Yeah,
and I can't remember exactly who he took down, but it was everyone in the final was a big name. It was like Greg, James and Vorney, or it was something like that, and he took them all down.
Fair play. And no, it's always nice to see the big sort of characters in Welsh surfing and getting them all around the table for Welsh nationals every year. It's nice to see it, isn't it? and who's up for grabs, like who's going to win it this year?
Well, we briefly touched on, again, your successful run at the 2011 Welsh at Llantuit, and we've talked about lots of victories, but how about maybe some lows or setbacks?
Yeah, there's loads
that you've encountered.
So setbacks
in your surf career.
So I think in 2009, I think I won one event in the Welsh, but the women's event I didn't do as well. I think I had a bit of a mental block. So yeah, I just remember, again, I think that was the start of the season after I was trying to come back and get back into the jersey again and trying to find a rhythm. And for sure that was, I wouldn't call it a low, but it was a learning curve of trying to not let fear get in the way of what I wanted to achieve. But I was lucky at that point that I could still compete in 2 different categories. So I had a backup plan in terms of the next day I got to compete in the under-18 girls. So that's fine. So that for sure. Setback, I mean...
I'm thinking qualification or selection for teams.
Yeah, so that's coming up. So yeah, I had... The year after was the 2011... No, 2009.
9, yeah.
Yeah, so 2009, I didn't get selected for, I think it was 2009, for the Welsh team for the Euros in Jersey, which I was pretty devo about.
People go.
Yeah, I think I won quite a lot of other things in that year, but I got third at the... I think I just didn't quite make the cut for the actual Welsh, and they've always been quite strict on having 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2 from the national results, regardless of what happened in other results, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
You learn a lesson of just like getting on with it and doing better and making it making something that people can't have a conversation about. So
that's a good phrase. Something people can't have a conversation about. You're sounding like a coach when in these things you're saying now, which you are. But how did you come into coaching then? Because I suppose it is those sorts of experiences are the experiences that make you as a coach, aren't they? Because sports is littered with these tales of great successful sports people who can't make that transition to coaching. But coaching needs that patience. You need to work people through those setbacks and things like that. So how did you suddenly notice that you were a coach and that you had that mindset?
I think if you've been through the junior system in the UK and you've been on training trips and you're aware of video analysis and you've done quite a lot of it in that amount of time through a good few years, you start to really understand what you need to do and what your flaws are, what you need to work on, and creating a plan for yourself. So you're almost becoming your own coach. Yeah. Because unfortunately it's not like football or hockey or rugby where you turn up and you do your 2 hours on a Monday and then you leave. It's not set up like that, which is great, which is the great part about surfing, is that it's spontaneous. But in terms of progression, you need to learn to be that for yourself. So I think subconsciously throughout all of those years of doing all those trips, being around lots of different inspiring people and great surfers, you come to a point where you end up going, well, actually, for some reason I've got this just like book of knowledge, I think, of maybe how to do a bit better. So it came to the point I pulled out of surfing, I think, in 2010 or 11 for a few years. Yeah.
Competitive surfing.
Competitive surfing, yeah. I just sort of didn't want to do it anymore, quite frankly. Wanted to focus on university, wanted to focus on new interests, and just really like change it up a bit, which was really, really lush and refreshing. And I got back into team sports, which I've always loved. So things like that became very important to me, but it also still highlighted my love for sport, number one, but number two, I still miss surfing. So I still miss that competitive environment, being around everyone, being around the community. So I think I went to the Welsh Nationals in 2014 or 15. I entered for the first time again for a few years, and I think I got third in the final. But that was pumping surf, not good surf, but big pumping surf, which was really fun to enter again. And I remember I think I spoke to Linda Sharp at that point, and I said, I really want to get involved. At that time, I don't think there was a space for me for whatever reason. Nothing bad, just I don't think they could facilitate my involvement at that point. But Surfing GB, who are now Surfing England, they did have a position and they were advertising for a coach or a female coach for their junior team to go to that World Games, which was in California in 2015, 10 years exactly after I went. So I was like, for sure I'm going to sign myself up.
It sounds meant to be there.
Yeah, I was like, for sure I'm going to do that. So I went to Cornwall, we had a few training camps, and that's when I was introduced to Ellie Turner, Kitty Brewer. Peony night I took to Nicaragua anyway in 2013 with Lloyd Cole.
Right.
So I've known those girls for a very, very long time. Emily Curry was on that 2015 trip.
Emily Curry longboards too, doesn't she?
She's the dual surfer, yeah. So she's incredible. So she does both the longboard and shortboard events. So she also is in Nicaragua and California.
Yeah.
So yeah, that trip was one of the biggest learning curve trips I've ever been on. Being 24 years old, managing 12 kids with 2 other men that I don't know. Staying in a hotel room with 2 other men in the 30s that I've never really spent a huge amount of time with. Yeah. Being up every day, walking surfers down to the comp site for sunrise because they're children and you can't leave children by themselves. So I remember doing...
And then having to be patient with them when they don't necessarily get it right in a heat.
Finding them. Are they out the surf? Where's that kid? Are they there? Have they been fed? Have they got water? Have they been out of the sun? Oh, that kid needs to be walked back. We were about 2 or 3 kilometres away from comp site. So I think one day I walked there and back like 3 times. Bearing in mind it's hot. I think I sat on my bed in the hotel room because I was like, right, I have 15 minutes off, and I slept for 15 minutes. And I was like, that's
what happens when you've got kids.
I know, I was 24, and I remember seeing Ingemar.
You learn to just sleep when you've got 15 minutes.
So Ingemar was there, Ingemar Cressy was there with the Welsh team coaching, as well as Sam Moore and Stuart Bentley managing.
Yeah, he'd have had kids by then, and he was probably delighted. It was
So he was there with the Welsh team, so we had a sit down, so he ended up just sitting next to me being like, I'm not even going to try a South African accent, so don't even try it.
Either, no.
I mean, I know you are tempted.
It's the only one I can't do.
So he was like, you're taking on a lot of responsibility, and I was like, never thought of it like that ever. I never thought, wow, I'm taking on responsibility. I thought, wow, I get to go and coach children and kids in an international surfing event, which is kind of like bread and butter for me.
Yeah.
So we went and surfed trestles a little bit. I watched Ellie Turner and Peony Knight smash through rounds. I watched Ellie Turner kick a few asses in terms of her first heat. She took off on a small nugget wave in Oceanside, and she was against one of the top seeded USA girls, and they've got a squad of like 20 people on the beach of parents and surfers, and she took off, and then she hit the first section, released her fins, came down, hit the second section, released her fins, and finished it. And I remember just all of them just looked down the beach and were just staring at us, and the girls had a few compliments off that trip, and a few of the guys absolutely ripped as well. But it was really cool and really inspiring, and being around that, I think, reignited that flame of wanting to be involved.
It's all that stuff, though, isn't it? About, like, have they got their toothpaste, have they got the right sun?
Yeah, for sure.
That's
You're like
the
a mum.
stuff that probably makes the difference, between people who will make it and not make it in a sport that is about travelling and looking after your body and your well-being and your
incremental gains.
Yeah,
isn't it?
It's the little things.
So it's all about margins, I would say. So you're creating an environment where people feel really happy, and they feel safe and they feel comfortable. And the more trips I've been away and done as a coach or as a manager, the more you realise creating that lovely, fun environment where you feel a bit of a family is incredibly important. Just because who doesn't want to feel really supported before they're going to go and compete? Because I don't know for you guys, but for me, if I know I've got a team of people all backing me, I'm like, well, I want to do this for them. I want to do it for me, but I want to do it for everyone else supporting me.
Yeah, and I guess it goes, certainly at that age, it goes beyond that, because you're in California or you're wherever, and as much as it is a surf contest and you want to kind of maintain that vibe, you've also spent probably quite a considerable amount of money getting there, and you want to have a good time, don't you, as well as do well in the contest?
Yeah, so that's interesting, because there's like a dual sort of way of seeing that. So when I go away as a coach or a manager, I'm never thinking I want to go away and have a good time.
No, I'm saying from the competitor's point of view. They want to be having a good time. They don't want to be sad.
For sure, but there's that really sort of the difference between professional approach and non-professional approach, which when you get a bit older becomes very apparent. You can tell the people who are there to compete and to win, and the people who are there just for the laugh and for like the free surfs, which, bearing in mind, that is critically important as these trips go for that development, especially when they're young. When kids are like 14 years old, all they need to do is go and surf as much as possible with these people who are incredible surfers. I mean, Eli Hanneman was at the last World Games, which was in Huntington in 2018, I think we went. Yeah. As the Welshman, I think it was myself, Patrick, Hugh, Martin John, EJ Cogger, and Joe Morris. So I think they got to see the new rising stars, and just being around that caliber and that level and that performance is so important for our kids.
Absolutely. And you mentioned quite a few names there, Gwen. who's on the tip of your tongue at the minute in terms of up-and-comers in Wales? And again, I know you won't want to leave anybody out, and it's kind of inevitable because I assume there's so many people that you'd like to mention.
Yeah, I think it's important to just be as encouraging as possible when kids are young, and if they're enjoying something, I feel like supporting kids to surf and to get into competitive surfing for me is becoming a bit of a priority. So scaling them at the moment for me is probably at the back of my mind, but one standout surfer for me is probably Alice Barton. In terms of her performance, in terms of what she's trying to do, the way she surfs, she's highly impressive, and I'm hopeful that continues on that trajectory that she's on.
You mentioned earlier we were talking about mindsets and stuff like that, and you touched on it then again, and Rob, you were talking about the guys who've gone to enjoy the trip, or the guys who've gone because they see it as a stepping stone and they see it as a learning experience. And you and I, Gwen, we've talked about this before, that mindset and how Wales is adjusting to that international competitive mindset now, and we've talked a bit about the idea that perhaps in rugby sometimes, the pinnacle is to play for Wales, or to play for Wales when they beat England. Whereas if you're an All Black, the pinnacle is not to play for the All Blacks, it's to win the World Cup as an All Black. And I think that Wales now, in football in particular, the ladies and the men's teams, both of them, completely now have got that total internationalist mindset that they want to be world beaters. Just having that Wales jersey that's not the reward anymore. It's what you do when you're in that Wales jersey. Do you think we're getting there in surfing then, where it's not the reward that, all right, I'm on the trip, I've gone to the Junior Europeans, yes, great, or whatever, it's like, are we getting there with people who've got that international outlook and they want to get out there and do it beyond Wales?
I feel like we've made a start in Wales by us having the opportunity to be able to go and take a team to ISA World Games. So for me, that was, for Wales specifically, our first stepping stone. The second stepping stone is not just to go, is to compete. And then the third stepping stone is we're not just here to compete, we're here to win. Right. Or we're here to make top 16, we're here to make top 8. Because in terms of what we look at when you think of performance and medal winning standard, you're really looking at top 8. Mm-hmm. So for us, going to European events is going to be really, really important. And pretty much what you touched upon then, Tom, you talked about really what we're looking at is a change of culture in our sport. So at the moment, it's really celebrated to represent your country, which is a huge accolade and an incredible achievement. But in terms of how we're going to move forward and create winners, we've then got to make and change the milestone and go, what's really important now for that top tier is creating medal winning standard and making that the norm, instead of being like, okay, cool, you've represented your country, so now we're just going to go surfing for a week in California. It's like, no, we're going because you have this heat tomorrow. And that was one really cool thing about Japan. When we were all sat there I was doing all the timings with all the athletes, and I was saying to Jay, look, Jay, you make this heat, you're going to be surfing like that podium at 240, you make that heat. So I was telling him, because that's the mindset we want to be thinking of, you're not maybe going to make this heat. Yes, we don't know yet, but you want the mentality of like, when you make this heat, you're going from that podium to podium 2, and you're going to be in 40 minutes afterwards. So make sure you got your water and you've got food if you're going to do that. And it's creating and changing the culture of how we view success in Wales and in the UK for surfing. But that happens from grassroots up, and it's going to take a very, very long time.
Producer Dodd is whispering in my ear here. He's saying that he can remember in the 90s, when a couple of us would make it to the Junior Europeans, that our mentality was always like, yes, Tom and Sage, you've got a free holiday somewhere to go surfing. And I think I probably am guilty as charged on a few of those occasions. What about you, Rob? Are you the free holiday guy when you qualified for events?
There's no such thing as a free holiday.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
No, like Gwen said, it's a massive honour, isn't it, being selected to represent your country. And I think certainly when I was a junior, there was a sense of we were going there to compete. Don't get me wrong. Like you wanted to win, you wanted to do your best. However, you were also aware that you come from a country that doesn't have surf 365 days a year. Yeah. You have, if you're lucky, you get probably 100 days surf per year, and it's more often than not it's windy and it's onshore, and we get far fewer good days than we do bad days of surf. And so there was always kind of like a caveat almost that you turn up and you get knocked out by, I don't know, some ripper from goodness knows where, and you go, oh well.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like there was no pressure, It certainly felt that way. there are two mindsets with this. I'm kind of torn between both camps because I felt at certain points as a junior that there could have been a lot more professionalism in certain aspects of it. However, and I actually had this conversation with Elliot Dudley earlier today, and Joel Tudor says it all of the time on his Instagram, and I don't agree with lots of the things Joel Tudor says. However, this one I'm kind of on board with, and he kind of rails against the jock culture that's invading surfing as he sees it. And I like the idea too of surfing being kind of like counterculture, anti-establishment, and not organised. But there's also a part of me, like I said, that likes the idea of having some kind of professionalism. So it is a divisive subject. I mean, I'm divided on myself on it.
I think it's super interesting when you think of surfing and you look at it from a sport perspective. You never turn up to a surf ready to compete. You never turn up, do your warm-up and then start a match. Surfing is innately non-competitive. So when you talk about that and we have this conversation, I separate them. So you can compete and surf, but you can also just free surf. They don't have to convolute one another.
I've always thought of it that way, but I think what Joel Tudor talks about when he says about the jock culture is that there's certainly not just in terms of competition, but kind of like it's pervasive in the culture in that there's been a shift towards like super high performance. You can't just go for a surf for the sake of it, and I see it in lots of British surfers' Instagrams. The idea they're like great training tonight, and it's like, well, you just went for a surf, didn't you? Like they just going for a surf out front of their house by themselves. Went training.
Is there a training surf and a free surf? There a training surf? Yeah.
I find this really interesting because, I mean, what I'm getting from you is that you're kind of anti that.
Well, like I say, I'm split. I like the idea of
he's got becoming... a Kai Neville What Youth cap on there, hasn't he? And I think
it's great to have opinions about where it's going and where the sport's moving, but like I've just said, it's a sport, and now it's centrally funded.
I've always liked the idea of it being a sport as well, because that's another thing I get fed up by, is it kind of being dismissed in mainstream media. So if they were to run an article on it on BBC News quite often, well, not necessarily BBC News.
Yeah, they don't even know that it's possible to compete.
They'll show like some guy in the whitewater on a foamy, and when they're talking about someone that's actually surfing at a really high standard, and they'll put like Beach Boys to it, and I love the Beach Boys. I think we had this chat with Andy Martin. They'll put Beach Boys to it, and they kind of like, it almost degrades it and makes it like a joke. And so I like the idea of it becoming more professional, so that we can be like, well, actually, no, this is surfing. Look what these guys are doing. They're professional athletes. They're doing this, this, and this.
That's coming with the Olympics, though, isn't it?
Pretty much. So what you're saying there is we want to be respected and represented correctly. The only way we're going to do that is by becoming more professional, because people, like you just said, the anti-culture and the rebellious act of surfing and what it used to stand for, that's what people tend to push against. It's because they associate surfing with drug taking, they associate surfing with rebellious acts. Whether we like it or not, most people I know that talk to that aren't surfers think it's a joke, because they're like, we don't take these people necessarily that seriously because of what they used to be associated with. And that's the fight now, is one versus the other. And hey, look, I'm all for lifestyle surfing, and I think it has so many health and mental well-being benefits, and I'm all for just going out on a foamy and having a laugh, even though I've been a competitive surfer. I think you need to do that to understand if you want to be a competitive surfer. I think if all you ever are is a competitive surfer, is you just see it as a sport, and that's fine. But it's understanding both sides of it, like you said, and go, you know what, from time to time I want to be surfer B, I want to be the competitor, which is, like you said, Tom, you can turn a surf into a training session. So as an example, you know, whenever we used to do training, the training would last for maybe 1 hour, and then the last 20 minutes it becomes more of a free, relaxed session where they can choose what they want to do on a wave instead of it having dictated to by the coach or by somebody else. So there's ways of looking at this and figuring it out, but it's definitely what you just highlighted, Rob, is the clash and the change of culture is uncomfortable for lots of people. And longboarding and shortboarding, by the way, I don't really think can be compared in lots of different elements. And in my opinion, longboarding is beautiful. It's also progressive. There's so many elements to it, as if you look at judging longboarding events represents, you know. Absolutely. Like you have Elliot, who's won multiple European titles, but then you look at Ben Skinner, and the way they both naturally surf is completely separate.
How can you judge those guys against each other? It's a mad thing.
So the disparity you get then with the judging
that's a big
skill.
challenge longboarding comes up against.
And I think so, and I don't know anywhere near enough about this, and Harrod, John and I have had many conversations.
Shifted now to a kind of away from that mimicking what shortboarders do on a wave more towards the traditional approach,
Interpretive,
isn't it?
Yeah, so it also depends on the wave that you're competing against. So, for example, at a European championships, the event isn't catered for longboarding. The event is catered usually for shortboarding because that covers the majority of all of the events.
And
it's in a dumpy beach break, which happened in Santa Cruz. So, the wave is naturally fitted to performance surfing rather than riding a log, so there's lots of different conversations that come within surfing and competing, and then you've got the different disciplines, which is a whole other ball game. And I just think the conversation and having conversations like this is good because it educates people and it goes like, where do we want to go? Some people want to go left, some people want to go right. Both are fine.
I've got a third hat to throw in the ring here.
Yeah,
I like the counterculture kind of rebellious nature, but I want to be represented properly in that. Not to be dismissed, not to be, as you said, not to be associated with drug taking or anything like that. I don't surfing to have that reputation because it's simply not that. That's been kind of enforced on surfing, isn't it?
How do we create that in mainstream media then? As if we're going to be a normal sport, we're competing against swimming.
I think we've got to get characters out there when
do you know what? I had this conversation yesterday with my old man.
Like, look at Italo Ferrer. Carissa. Look at what these guys are going to do.
You need good practice.
Dad made some comment yesterday about how you never, despite the surf this evening was absolutely packed. There's so many people in surfing. The beach car parks are all full. Yet, how often do you hear surfing referenced properly in mainstream media? So, on the weather, for instance. Now, every now and again, Derek Brockway might make some mention of surfing, but it's very, very infrequently. And Dad was just kind of saying, well, why didn't they say it more and more? And I kind of made the point that I like that it's not. I want surfing to be, I like it as my own, and I don't want to share it with everybody else.
It's so funny, because we talk about this now and we say, we want people to understand it more and we want people to fairly represent it. But, we're three people who probably know quite a bit in different ways about surfing and we can't really agree on our direction.
It's mad, isn't it?
So if... you've won titles, I've won
myself.
You know what I mean? So if we're sat here and we're trying to find a direction for it and we are struggling with that, and we are going to get there because we are a sport. It's uncomfortable.
You've got 5 seconds. 5 seconds each. You've got to make your case.
What?
I'll go with myself. Surfing, non-jock culture, anti-establishment. Keep it to ourselves.
All right, I'm just going to say snowboarding has managed to keep that unique identity and become a mainstream sport, and it's done it well. Surfing can do it too.
Surfing's changing, guys. Get used to it.
Yes, I like that. I will say as well, it's rich of Joel Tudor to be suddenly this kind of representative, because I saw that guy when he was...
Don't mention it.
No, because we're going to end up on his
winning all his
Instagram.
stuff in the 90s. Will he mention us?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Bring it on, Joe. I saw that guy when he was winning his stuff in the 90s in the Oxbow days, and he was a gnarly, fiery, competitive, athletic guy that wanted to beat people.
Oh, absolutely, he was.
What is he doing for longboarding now? Is he like?
Runs some
does he run a contest?
With duct tape,
So he runs a contest,
but contest where there's no rules, there's no judging criteria.
So he doesn't like contests, but he runs a contest.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't mind contests. He likes contests. He doesn't like the
I'm
jock.
up for getting slagged off by him on Instagram.
Can somebody define jock culture for me? Because I just know sport.
And jock culture as non-surf. I do.
The jock culture,
right?
As he intends it. I mean, not to put words in anyone's mouth. Certainly, as I see it, then perhaps is the idea on those like you see in basketball when they're like in the lineup, and then the basketball player turns around and faces the camera with like their top off, and they're like tense, and it's got all their weight and everything. Surfing started to do that with the WSL. That's jock culture, and have like fake technologies on wetsuits and board shorts and all that nonsense. Just get a pair of trunks on and go in surfing.
I'd call that Americanized.
Yeah, I think it's a
like
pulling away from the kind of the disorderly and higgledy-piggledy nature of surfing that makes surfing great, in my opinion.
Fair.
You're a sports fan, right? It's not happening this year, unfortunately. It'll be off till next year. But I'm telling you what, anyone interested in sports, you've got to try and get yourself to one of those London Series games and go and see the NFL.
Yeah.
And the way that they put together the razzmatazz and the way that they organise this sport and they turn it into a spectator spectacle and they turn it into something that's good on TV at the same time. I'll stop there because otherwise everyone's going to get bored because everyone knows I talk about the NFL till the cows come home. But and also it's full of all the geekery, the stuff I love to. I geek out on the NFL. But
all the stats.
Promise me that you'll find a way of getting down to one of those London games and go and see it. What a chance to see what sport can actually be. It's the global model for growing a sport.
Well, I think that's the entertainment coming into the sport performance, isn't it? And I feel like you just said, Rob, that's maybe what you don't like.
Well, the thing is, I am a massive sports fan. So if there's a sport on TV, I'll watch it. Because I've had season tickets for cricket, the sport that most people find boring.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely in love with it.
But you just don't know where surfing sits.
I just don't. I like to separate them. Surfing's my my little secret off to the side. Okay, so moving away from the ins and outs and where surfing should or shouldn't be going. How about you, Gwen? How are you enjoying your surfing at the moment?
So where are we now? What day is it? Is it the 25th or 24th of June?
Time's gone out the window.
Time has gone out the window.
June, yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out how many surfs I've had in the last few days, and I think this is the most I've surfed for like a year. Really enjoying it, just simply to answer your question. I think I just enjoy the social element of it as well, to be honest. I like compartmentalise and put competitive stuff to one side and just enjoy going out, paddling around, flailing about in the water, trying to catch a few waves, trying to do a few turns and embarrassing myself. So yeah, it's good.
I like it. And we've heard so much about your kind of sporting mindset, and you've just said you put it to one side, but you're clearly quite a goal-oriented person. And I know you said that you kind of put the competitive side of surfing away whilst you go out and enjoy yourself.
Yeah.
But do you have any goals around the fun side of it? So that might look like trying different boards or going on trips to certain places?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I pulled back from competing a bit, I spend a lot of time in Australia because my brother-in-law, who is Sam Burkett, who was a brilliant Welsh team surfer and British team surfer.
I bumped into him in the lineup in the Superbag, actually.
Of course you did.
And he said, I'm a poker player, he said.
Yeah, because he is.
Wow.
Professional poker player.
And then I caught the best wave of my life a few seconds later, and he saw it. And so then I was like...
Did he actually congratulate you on that wave?
I rode it all the way down and then got out and drove to the airport, so I haven't seen him since.
Oh, bless.
No, so he probably just saw me take off on it.
I mean, I'm really glad that you had the best wave of your life very soon after chatting to him. That gives me life.
To see him.
The last time I think I surfed the Superbank, or one of the times, I think I did the worst bog rail turn of my life in front of Stephanie Gilmore, and I was like, yes, I was like, I am getting out now because that is my life completely and utterly over. And I think I waited like an hour for it as well.
Yeah.
That's after he tried to persuade me to paddle out at Snap, and he was like, oh yeah, it's like 4 foot, and I was like, oh okay, cool. I'd never check because I'm just like, I trust him, we're gonna go, it's fine. And as we're walking over the hill where we parked on the top overlooking Rainbow and Greenmount, and I could barely see the bottom of the surfer when they were bottom turning, like pretty much behind the rock, and I was like, yes, I'm sure 4 foot. And then he paddled out on the slip through, and I went and paddled out just before Marley, I think it is. I paddled out there and just waited for some fun ones there, and had the worst turn of my life in front of Steph Gilmore. So what a great tale, but I was pretty happy about it, to be honest.
We'll keep that one for the next grand final of Horror Surf Tales, Rob, won't we?
Yeah, do that.
So you were talking about travel, though, as like travel is a thing that you enjoy then.
Yeah, I totally didn't even answer your question, sorry.
Right. That's what a good podcast is.
So in terms of what I look at now, of what I want to do, I just want to try and get in as much as possible and keep that level of surf fitness up, because I'm worried that if I don't surf enough, I'll lose it a bit, and then you're spending such a long amount of time trying to build it back. Whereas if you can kind of maintain that, that's fun, and it makes it more enjoyable, I think, if you're not absolutely exhausted if you've surfed a few times in a row. So that for sure is one thing I'm focusing on. If I have time, I want to surf, and I want to commit that time to surfing. But other than that, I just enjoy the banter around it, and if I get to go a few more places around the world managing and coaching, then that's great, but it's all about the experiences.
Cool. Well, Gwen, I'm going to thank you very much for coming and talking to us about this stuff. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we know you're still hopeful that the trip to El Salvador might go on later in the year. You got anything else planned before that? If we don't know what's going to happen yet. You got anything on the horizon in terms of trips? Yeah,
so I'm hopeful to get out to Australia, to the Gold Coast, within the next 6 months or a year, whenever Australia allows non-citizens in, as my sister and Sam are due to have a baby within the next month or 5-6 weeks.
Congratulations, guys.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that, potentially. Gutted I can't be there with her for that, but you never know, maybe in the next 6 months.
Well, that's going to make Burkett a little bit less deadly in the at Little Marley.
Honestly,
2 sleepless nights, it'll do him good.
He's sleepless nights. He doesn't go to sleep.
Oh yeah,
he's nocturnal, I swear.
All right. On that note, we've recently finished a double episode on surf trip nightmares. So hopefully that's going to turn out to be a surf trip dream. There, you get back over there, and the world's going to start opening up again for travel. With days bright and the weather good, one thing we've noticed was how much stoke people got, even from bad travel tales. So what we're going to do down the line now is start to come up with some other feature travel episodes, this time basing them on a theme country. We had a lot on Indonesia still left in stock, so that's going to happen before the season's out, but we're going to start by appealing to listeners for France tales. Who knows if anyone will get there this summer, but either way, it seems a good time of year to reminisce about that place. So listeners, if you have ideas, do let us know by Instagram or by emailing castcrest@gmail.com.
In the meantime, don't forget you can also subscribe to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, as well as on YouTube, where you'll be able to see the growing number of neon tiles which denote our backlist of episodes to date. Next up, we're going to be talking about the giant stuff with Mid-Walian surfer Glyn Ovens. How does someone from this country learn and prepare for the step up to becoming a bona fide big wave rider? We'll hear about Nazare and all its moods, and what it's like to surf the world's most revered toe spot. We're looking forward to it. So that all that remains for this week is to reiterate our thank yous. Besides Gwen, of course, can we stress our gratitude to you, the listener. Take care, and see you soon.
Heil var.
Thank you for having me.
1, 2